afternoon, and welcome to Union Township's Veterans Memorial Park. I'm Tim Donlin, Chairman of the Union Township Trustees, and on behalf of Bob McGee and Matt Beamer, my colleagues, I welcome you to our beautiful facility. I want to welcome back the American Veterans Traveling Tribute. I was at Union Township back in 2003, had 25,000 visitors here at that time, and we're glad to have it back in our park. I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce, the Board of Trustees, obviously, and the American Veterans Traveling Tribute for being able to put this event together in conjunction with the Clermont Veterans and the chapter reviewing 649. Again, I will say welcome and welcome home.
Will you all now uncover or salute? Follow along with me, if you will, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light, once so proudly we hailed at the twilight's fast gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the
Please be seated. Behind you, in front of the wall, you will see as you tour the wall a white table with a place setting for one. Those who have served and those who are currently serving in uniformed services in the United States are ever mindful that the sweetness of enduring peace has always been tainted by the bitterness of personal sacrifice. We are compelled to never forget while we enjoy our daily pleasures, there are others who have endured, may still endure the agonies and pain, deprivation, and internment. So before we begin our activities today, we pause to recognize our POWs and MIAs. And we again call your attention to this small table which occupies a place of dignity and honor near the wall. It is set for one, symbolizing the fact that members of our armed forces are missing from our ranks. They are referred to as POWs and MIAs. We call them comrades. They are unable to be here with their loved ones and families today, so we join together to pay our humble tribute to them and bear witness to their continued absence. This table is set for one, is small, symbolizing the frailty of one prisoner alone against his or her suppressors. The tablecloth is white, symbolic of the purity of their intentions to respond to their country's call to arms. The single red rose in the vase signifies the blood the many have shared in sacrifice to ensure the freedom of our beloved United States of America. The rose also reminds us of the family and friends of our missing comrades who keep the faith while awaiting their return. The yellow ribbon on the vase represents the yellow ribbons worn on the lapels of thousands who demand with unyielding determination a proper accounting of our comrades who are not among us. A slice of lemon on plate reminds us of their bitter fate. The salt sprinkled upon the plate reminds us of the countless fallen tears of families as they wail. The glass is inverted. They cannot toast with us today. The chair is empty. They are not here. The candle is reminiscent of the light of hope which lives in our hearts to illuminate their way home, away from their captors, to the open arms of a grateful nation. Let us pray to the Supreme Commander that all our comrades will soon be back within our ranks. And let us remember and never forget their sacrifices. All right, you will see a wreath in commemoration with POWs and MIAs. And we are going to place that wreath out there by the wall. But before I place this wreath, I would like to relate the story of a local man whose life began on December 12, 1949, but which ended on June 22, 1970. While walking point for his squad on a combat mission in Vietnam's Quang Ngai province, Army PFC Robert W. Gilbert Jr. was believed killed by an explosive device. Also killed were Spec Forward Gary Pete of Ruley, Wisconsin, and Spec Forward Joseph Turowski of Baltimore, Maryland. The explosion reportedly created a crater 4.5 foot deep and 12 foot wide. The bodies of Spec Forward Pete and Spec Forward Turowski were recovered, but only PFC Gilbert's wall tainted with black powder residue and numerous tears and some letter were found. Also found were some small pieces of rucksack, but no evidence of PFC Gilbert. In 1974, a Vietnamese source reported a gravesite with American remains. The information tentatively correlated to PFC Gilbert's case. However, inconclusive evidence was ever found to even be sufficient to identify a specific individual. It is apparent that PFC Gumbert died under the circumstances described above. He is listed with honor among the missing because he is an American fighting man who is still in enemy hands, alive or dead. This is one of the few cases of missing American soldiers that will probably never be resolved by the return of the remains. And now I would like to offer my sincere condolences to PFC Gumbert's father, Robert W. Gumbert Sr. Sir, would you rise, as well as members of your family who are present. I'd also like to recognize former Congresswoman Jean Schmidt and have her rise for her efforts in assisting Mr. Gumbert in trying to retrieve the remains of his son. I would also ask that Mr. Gumbert Sr. accompany me as I place this POW MIA wreath in front of the wall.
Army, Spec 4, Martin Mogavin, Cincinnati, Ohio, February 23rd, 1967, age 20. Army, Spec 4, John McCoy, Milford, Ohio, May 7th, 1967, age 21. Navy, HM 3rd Class, Charles Crawford, Batavia, Ohio, May 29th, 1967, age 26. U.S. Air Force, Major Kenneth Hughes, Williamsburg, Ohio, August 11th, 1967, age 32.
Mr. Welling came to the USO in early 2013 after serving as the director of the Department of Defense's Yellow Ribbon Reintegration Program, promoting the well-being of 1.2 million National Guard and Reserve members, their families, and communities by connecting them with resources throughout the deployment cycle. Prior to 2010, Mr. Welling served for 15 years as a faculty member and director of the Ohio State University's extension programs in southwestern Ohio. Mr. Welling continues his more than 34 years of military service as a Command Master Chief in the Naval Reserve at Naval Air Facility, Washington, D.C. He also serves as a faculty advisor at the Naval War College Senior Enlisted Academy. A combat veteran, he deployed to Iraq in 2008 and 2009 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and was awarded the Bronze Star Medal. Welling holds a bachelor's degree in geography and environmental science and a master's in economic geography from the University of Cincinnati. Glenn and his wife Marie, along with 2 of their 4 children, reside in Bristow, Virginia. Mr. Welling, welcome to this area.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and what a beautiful ceremony on a glorious day here in Clermont County. I first want to thank the Clermont County Veteran Services Commission for extending an invitation for me to come here and speak today. The Union Township trustees for hosting this great display. I see representatives from a lot of veteran service organizations here today. Thank you for your service. And of course, the American Veterans Traveling Tribute and the numerous volunteers that support this activity as it travels across the country. And thanks to each and every one of you, including my family and friends that are here today. Thank you so much for being here. We gather here today to honor service and devotion to duty. We honor the men and women on these walls and those who served before and after them. This wall connects us as Americans, connects us to one another, and even to those we never knew. And it connects us to our collective history. Not long after moving to Washington, D.C. from Cincinnati, my family and I visited the Vietnam Veterans Wall on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. If you've ever been there, you know that people leave lots of articles and mementos along the wall. Among the items left by family and friends that day was a handwritten note to a man whose name has already been read today. Marine First Lieutenant Andrew Martin Haglich, killed in action on February 4th, 1969. What caught my eye was the note had been left by someone from Batavia, Ohio. I knew someone named Haglich from Batavia, Ohio, so there must have been some connection. Sure enough, Andrew had a younger brother who was also serving in the Marine Corps in Vietnam during that time. I never knew Andrew, but years later I would come to know Danny Haglich as we served together in the Batavia Rotary Club. And that connection for me was immediate and it was powerful. I felt that in some small way I shared in the Haglich family's grief and loss, just as hundreds of thousands of other Americans share in the grief and loss of a nation as they experience the wall. Visiting the Vietnam Veterans Memorial is powerful for a number of reasons. First, you come to understand what sacrifice really means, what service really means. Year by year, name by name, you understand what many of our fellow citizens at the time either failed or refused to understand. For those who fought there, the Vietnam War was a war. It wasn't a geopolitical exercise, a punchline, or theme of a speech. It was a real, live war involving our neighbors, the sons and daughters of our neighbors, our brothers and our sisters were there, and they served well and honorably. The names etched on these walls force us to recognize that wars are fought by real people who put their lives in danger for a cause greater than ourselves. The design of the wall is important as well. You're reflected by its materials. You're drawn in. You become a part of the wall, part of the experience in a way that was not true in the 1960s and the 1970s. While you're there, you can't escape. And I know it's a small gesture, but on behalf of the USO, I'd like to say to the Vietnam veterans here today, welcome home. Home to the country that didn't do enough for you when you returned. America learned much from our experience in the Vietnam War. Even today, it shapes how we as a nation view our role in the world and how we weigh the human consequences, both inside and outside of our borders, of engagement on foreign soil. One thing that jumps out to me is the lesson that service should never be ignored or taken for granted. And we see that today. Almost everywhere where troops are encountered, they are honored. And that's great and it's necessary. But it took an experience more than 40 years ago to teach us that lesson, to illustrate that connection between then and now. And to reiterate how those who serve today deserve our support, just like you who served in Vietnam deserve our support. I would like to use an example from my organization, the USO. The USO was with you in Vietnam, and it was the first conflict where we had a physical presence right there on the battlefield in combat areas. That's a practice we continue today. During Operation Iraqi Freedom, the USO had 3 centers in Iraq. I used them many times myself. They provided a needed respite and also a means to stay connected with family and friends back here in Ohio. Today, right now, there are 8 USO centers in Afghanistan, at large bases and at small forward operating bases and combat outposts. Just as we were there with you in Southeast Asia, today's USO is lifting the spirits of America's troops across Southwest Asia. Because the USO is not a government agency and relies on the kindness and generosity of donors, we're able to respond quickly to the evolving needs of service members and their families, and to be that connection between the American public and our troops. Every year, millions of Americans and dozens of great corporations continue to step up and support American service members and their family through the USO. It's been gratifying, and it's allowed us to expand our services to those troops who need us the most. And it's also part of the Vietnam legacy. People understand that they can express their feelings about America's involvement in Iraq or Afghanistan in a number of different ways. But Vietnam taught us that taking out our frustrations on our troops is not one of those ways. It's also important to remember that support for troops must not end with our withdrawal from Afghanistan next year. Supporting the troops, it's almost uniquely American, and that support doesn't require a war. Beyond our presence in Afghanistan, thousands of our finest men and women are deployed across the globe, many in places that you're familiar with: Japan, Germany, Korea. But American service members are deployed on every continent and on the high seas around the globe, often in harm's way, ensuring our security far from friends and loved ones. And they'll be there for years to come. Supporting them and those who come after them, it's not just an American tradition, it's an American obligation. Vietnam didn't teach us that. Vietnam reminded us of that. We're here today to honor the veterans of past wars and the sacrifice at home by troops and first responders, whether in response to an attack on our own soil or natural or humanitarian disasters at home and abroad. As we do that, we must also remember that their sacrifice will continue. Service and devotion to duty will continue. And our best will continue to step up and walk the wire, and when called upon, run into the fire at places we may not even think about today. It's an honor to be with you here today, and it's an honor to be part of an organization that stood with our troops and families for 72 years and will continue to be there whenever and wherever they serve. God bless our veterans and those who continue to serve, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.